On that way. Yeah, that's fine. Oh, we're here. Oh, it's perfect.
Hey, guys. All right. Thank you for your weather.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
Microcosm of weather.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, that's fine. And you're live.
Okay, thanks. Hi, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Victoria and Esquimalt Police Board public meeting for October 15th. And just for anybody watching in online, I'd like to let any members of the public know that this is one of the many times that we meet as a board in different capacities throughout the month. And this is our opportunity to share things publicly. We look to bring as many items for discussion, presentations forward to public meetings as possible, to offer you as much information and transparency as we can. I'm just going to hand it over quickly to board member Tim Katuri, who's going to do our territorial acknowledgement.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to acknowledge with gratitude that we are meeting on the traditional lands of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and Kusapsan nations. With gratitude, we live, work, learn, where the past, present, and future of Indigenous and non-Indigenous people come together. In honor of the Songhees and Kusapsan ancestors, Haichka.
Thank you very much. And just quickly procedurally, I'll take a motion to adopt the public agenda. Elizabeth, second by Marianne, all those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And a special welcome to folks from Econ today. We're really pleased to have you here. So thank you for taking the time to come and present. And I will turn it right over to you, Oliver Gruder-Andrew, the CEO and President of Econ, to welcome your team and give us a presentation.
Thank you very much. We're very privileged and pleased to be here. As you said, Madam Chair, my name is Oliver Gruder-Andrew, President and CEO of Econ. I'm here joined by two of my colleagues, our Vice President of Operations, Mr. Stephen Thatcher, and our Executive Director of Finance, Mr. Jason Rood. And we were asked to spend about 10 minutes giving an overview, specifically focusing on our financial forecast for next year and for the coming year. We're happy to do that. We'll also give a quick update on how we're performing in the context of the funding that we receive and what our service levels are like. And we'll also briefly speak about the investments that we're making in improving the service as we're going through. 10 minutes is not too much time. We are going to try and be very brief and allow plenty of time for questions. Necessarily, we're not going into a lot of depth, but we'll be very happy to not only take your questions here, but follow up as appropriate as you're interested. So with that said, I will hand it over to my colleague, Stephen.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. Slide, please.
I don't know where the square boxes come from, so I'm sorry.
You can see the agenda. We'll skip past that and go to the next slide, which is actually some metrics. So what you're looking at is a very simple chart that tracks our performance to service level targets against our actual performance in those years, 2019 to 2024, year to date. What we're looking for obviously is the green, which means we met our service level targets. The red is obviously not very encouraging, and the yellow is sort of somewhere in between. The two metrics that we really want to watch for this audience are the EVCI police emergency calls. That's the second row. That's the speed with which we're answering calls for your police department. We aim to answer 88% of those calls in 10 seconds or less. You can see for the last couple of years, we've done very well in doing that. We're actually a little bit ahead of the pace again this year. The third row down, ECVI police non-emergency is what NER stands for. Our target is to answer 80% of those calls within 3 minutes or less. You can see we performed badly in 2019, recovered for a couple of years. 2022 was a bit of dip in performance, although not far off our target. And then we're right on target again for this year. What those green boxes don't indicate is the amount of effort that goes into achieving those standards. ECVI, our Vancouver Island location, was launched sort of as an independent location to service the island, so those police communities on the lower half of the island. In reality, you're supported almost daily by staff from the lower. Because you simply don't have the space or the volume to do this. The budget is squared away, so you're paying for those resources, just not located in your community. The other element that I want to highlight here is dispatch is a primary focus for us in delivering service to police communities. It's a much harder thing to measure. So we watch our performance on these metrics as well as our dispatch performance very closely every day. Because the scale of the Vancouver Island location is much, much smaller than our Vancouver location, 1 or 2 absences, 1 or 2 sick calls in the course of a day can seriously impact performance on that day. And we are very, very closely guarding, the ways in which we can make sure that any of those gaps are closed. That's a lot of work by our workforce management team. It's a lot of people stepping up late in the day to fill vacancies. It's a lot of people working extra time. So although those numbers are very healthy looking, I'm just going to let you know now that they are a little bit precarious, and that's part of the reason we'll be talking about budget numbers that we are into 2020. Where do those calls come from? Many of them come from that 911 target. So that is, those calls come largely from around the province, including the Lower Island, for service in your community. We try to answer those calls 95% of the time in 5 seconds or less. In fact, we're doing better than that. The reason that metric is important to you, and if you go to the next slide, please, is that about 65% of 911 calls end up in a police service, about 5% end up with a fire service, and about 30% the remainder end up with the BC ambulance service. The reason why the numbers are disproportionately skewed towards the police is in part if the call taker doesn't understand exactly what service the caller requires, the default by common agreement is the police. The police will actually launch their investigation, determine what the nature of the emergency is, and move on from there. 2 things I want to highlight. That black line is the spike that we saw in 2023. That's 911 calls. That was largely caused by an issue with an Android operating system. So that's a time in which technology was not our friend. There were a lot of artificial calls to 911 that had to get serviced. That was a very, very heavy year. You can see the year to date, the pink line 2024 is much more in line with 2022, which we're generally using as our baseline for current forecasting and performance measurement. 2021, as you recall, was another outlier because of the heat dome. So this year is tracking closely to 2022, and that is what we're looking at in terms of move ahead as we try to forecast what kind of staff we need in order to deliver service to our required levels. 2025. Next slide. A number of years ago, when we realized that our performance was lagging, particularly in the Lower Mainland, we undertook a really conscientious effort to get to the root of those problems. We engaged PricewaterhouseCoopers in that research. We engaged members of the police executive in the province and the communities that we serve. And they made a number of recommendations that we built plans on, and we've executed those plans. A lot of that was about increasing our staffing level. We were 125 call-taking staff short at that time. And you can see that that would leave an obvious gap. We have changed the way in which we staff and train. We're much more successful now in onboarding. We have a higher percentage of our staff who get through training successfully. We've modularized our training in some instances to speed it up. We also went through a major exercise with police agencies to harmonize our standard operating procedures to make it easier for people to just cover multiple desks when the need arises. So rather than having specialized SOPs for each department, they look a lot more alike. That makes training, quality control, and a number of aspects of workforce management rather easier. We've really stepped up our data analytics game. We understand more about what's going on in the workforce day to day, and increasingly hour by hour allows us to make on-the-fly adjustments. We'll also make it easier for us to report out to you in terms of our performance. We'll ultimately be opening up a portal which your department personnel can look at to see our performance for themselves. They don't have to wait for us to issue monthly reports. And secondly, or lastly, cybersecurity. I think everybody's aware of the risk. I believe you've got a presentation on cybersecurity coming up right after this. With the introduction of next generation 911 on the horizon, our security profile around cybersecurity needs to increase dramatically. That's going to be a major driver for us going forward. What has that resulted in? Better people metrics. We're hiring more easily. We're retaining longer. We're advancing people within our ranks more successfully. It's really stabilized our workforce. We've seen a rebound in our service levels much more dramatically, I have to say, in the Lower Mainland than here on the Lower Island, because the issues were deeper. And we're also looking towards sustainability. How do we maintain those service levels? How do we keep our staff satisfied? How do we make sure that we can take on additional burdens as they arise in 2025 and beyond? So that's the plan. We're working the plan. The plan is yielding results. If you have time and questions, we're happy to come to those, but maybe I'll turn the floor over to my colleague, Jason, for talk financial picture for next year.
Flip to the next slide. So I'm going to start off just briefly touching on how the budget has changed. So normally, historically, what we would do about this time of year when Ecom started working on their budget, they would issue a levy notice to the chief. Obviously, this is much too late in the year. So we fundamentally did things different this year. We came back a lot earlier in the process. We took it to our board March, April. We met with various chiefs throughout the province, frankly. And instead of just presenting a number for Ecom, we actually presented proposal, and you'll see that in a future slide here. We really wanted to discuss options and service level options with our partners. And there were things that we needed to do to maintain the status quo. But there were also other things that while they, added value to the e-com and would be beneficial, perhaps there was some timing flexibility. So those are things that we talked with the leadership teams from a lot of the police departments, fire agencies, and radio agencies as well across the province to really get feedback and input into our budget process. And now we're taking that back to our board, and because of that, we have a more narrow range based on the feedback that we heard. The other thing I do want to note is that e-com is in the midst of a governance review. We have an external review going on to look into our governance, and associated with that is a financial model review, looking at how we do our finances, how we make our levies more transparent, fair, predictable, those type of things. And that's work that's underway. So the models or the levies that you'll see on the next slide that you can flip to are based on the current model that could change going forward. So this is the past few years, as well as in the future, a range that we see. These are the more narrow ranges. Gives a preliminary outlook. We've taken this to our board and they have endorsed these numbers. We are going for a workshop in a couple weeks, and then we'll narrow these numbers even farther. Ultimately, with the goal of adopting the e-com budget on November 21st, but we are confident that it will be within these ranges. We flip to the next slide. So looking forward, these are the discussions that we had. The line at the bottom there is 0 to 9%, just for context. So the top levies numbers that we had there represent the slide you just saw. The significance of the blue shaded categories, those are all categories that, given the feedback we heard when we talked to the police leadership, are being deferred. Deficit reduction, we have a deficit, e-com's run a deficit, as a lot of the funding improvements that Stephen discussed, the service improvements were done intentionally to get ahead of that before we were able to see the payback and the results, which we're seeing now. The e-com board made a conscious decision to run a deficit. Moving forward, we do have some capacity issues around a third location. And there are also some other improvements, but in the interest of time, we'll leave it at that for now. The one thing I do want to note though, with those being pushed off, as example, the deficit reduction being pushed off. So it's not a cost in 2026, but it will be a cost in 2027 as an example. And for that specific item, we have talked to the leadership about different options for repayment instead of adding it to the levy. I think with that, unless there are questions about levies that we can get to later, I'll turn it back to Oliver to wrap us up here.
Yes, we could have the next slide. Thank you. So I'll just spend a minute to speak about the transformational initiatives that we've been pursuing for the last several years. And this is all about both improving and stabilizing our operation and preparing us for what we see coming in the future. The two areas we started focusing on after the review in 2021 that Stephen mentioned were around operations and people collaboration, stabilization. Particularly here at ECBI, we were able to stabilize the operational results. You saw that in the slide Stephen spoke to, but very importantly, stabilize the people aspect of the work. We struggled with a lot of initial turnover. We struggled with recruiting funnel challenges. Part of it may have been our new brand on the island when we first established in 2019, with a lot of the focus on mental health development for our staff, and the improvements in the workplace, supervisory improvements. We've been successful stabilizing that and having our staff much more engaged now than they were a few years ago. Other initiatives are internally focused to e-com, but are very meaningful for the delivery of the service. And I'll call out the governance one, because our governance is very much based on the organization that was founded in the Lower Mainland 25 years ago. So it's very Lower Mainland centric. It's very radio user centric. As you probably know, in the Lower Mainland, we also offer the service desk Crest offers on the island. And we're looking to evolve beyond that and be more representative of the provincial service partners that we now have quite literally all over British Columbia. And I'll just touch on the last one because it's an acronym that many of you will have come across by now. Next Generation 911, Stephen referred to it as the overhaul of the backend 911 technology by which we receive and process the calls. It's an initiative that plays out quite literally all around the world, specifically in North America. It's federally mandated in Canada. Implementation is being funded by the province. In the long term, it's both opportunity and risk, and that plays out specifically on the cyber side, where we need to make more investments. So if I could have my last slide, please. So just in summary, we've made a lot of investments over the last several years in helping to stabilize the organization, the operation, and get us more ready for that future change anticipation coming from next generation 911, cyber changes, etc. We know that we have to go with another year or two of investments, and we also recognize that we cannot make investments indefinitely as to simply a limit to the funding ability by our partners. So we're trying to strike that balance, and that was reflected in the slides that Jason showed in what we had initially put on the table as discussions, things we could do, the dialogues that went back and forth with our partners, the things that were dialed out, the things we decided to focus on at this point. And we do know that our levies are still in line with other agencies of our type that operate across Canada and operate around North America when we look at numbers like cost per call or cost per dispatch. But we also know that's ultimately not helpful when property taxes are tight and it's very difficult to find investments between this and other challenges. So I'll pause there. I'm happy to take your questions.
Start with Barb.
Thank you for the presentation. If we could go back to the last slide. In terms of your increases, have you considered, rather than doing very large increases for a few years, being able to spread those out over a longer period of time? Because I'm really concerned about a 20% ask when you're only one part of anybody's budget.
Yeah, right. So Jason, can you speak to that from an accounting?
Yeah, so that's essentially what happened at the beginning of the transformation plan. The board did approve a significant $2.8 million in-year deficit with the understanding that would have to be paid off eventually. And that's one of the items that we saw on the board being deferred. So I think that was the type of decision that was made in the past. We're trying to get away from that, quite frankly. We want to fund in year so that we don't saddle future generations, for lack of a better word, with the money that we need today. It is something the board can consider and we can take that feedback, but it's not a recommended course of action at the moment. Personally.
Thank you. My second question is around governance, because I was on this police board when we requested that there be an island representative on your board. And at the time, we ended up having my deputy chief, Colin Watson, attending. Colin Watson is no longer on the island. Have you replaced Colin Watson?
Yes, it's Deputy Chief Paul Douglas from the Sandwich Police.
Okay, and why do we have a police representative instead of a board representative?
It's actually entirely your choosing. So the process works through the South Island Partner Steering Committee that we have. That's a group that oversees the service delivery that ECOM provides. That group could be constituted by any representative from police departments or boards, mostly represented by police officers. And that group chooses a representative for the ECOM board. But it's not to say that this board couldn't talk to the other boards and make a different decision.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Go to you, Holly.
What is the other feedback that you're getting from other police boards about this presentation?
I think it's fairly consistent. Everybody is concerned about the increases we've incurred over the last few years. And, we're very transparent about the reasons for that. And we completely understand to the earlier comment that we can't carry on like that, and we're not going to. There is appreciation, I would say, specifically in the Lower Mainland, about the improvements to our service levels. Our service was struggling a lot more in the Lower Mainland for a number of years. And there is a recognition that the the way that the future is shaping up around our kind of work requires some form of investment. There is a question of where that investment should come from. And whether it's still appropriate for that to be a property tax obligation, or whether there are reasons to talk to more senior levels of government. And the next generation 911 investment is an example because it is federally imposed, but it's not federally funded. And we know the province stepped up for the implementation, but there are questions about the longer term support of the funding need of that. Those conversations are in progress with the province, with a lot of support from the UBCM. But I would say that's sort of a reflection of what other boards are saying.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Thanks very much. I've got Sean next.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think you've answered one of my questions, which was regarding the next gen 911, the province has been about $90 million. It was, and of course, to help get you to the federal mandated deadline. So you make a point that there is, of course, once that implemented, there's be operational costs or costs perhaps that boards and what have you want to absorb. Since I've been in this board, I've seen econ revenue growth from 75 million to 120 million last year, which is really a cost to the communities. And I see there's a 20% increase or request from our board this year, possibly from next year. That's fine. But however, the deficit has grown from 1.5 million to about approximately 8 million as of last year per year. So with the deficit still carrying forward, and you're putting on slides saying they're slowly, your board has decided to pay your deficit somewhat less now, but maybe more so later. What assurances can we get as a board that your deficit will be managed or controlled? Because that to me is a bit of a play upstairs for your organization, of course, because ultimately I'm thinking that you're going to probably come to us 2026, 27, 28 saying, I really need to pay this deficit down, which really means come back to us to help you pay that. So I was curious to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so the down payment of the existing deficit is certainly something we need to look to our funding partners too, because we do not have other sources of revenue to do that. We are much more confident that unless something external comes at us that is not foreseeable, we're not going to be back in that deficit situation. This year is very stable in period financially. We have no concerns, and the budgets that we are showing you for the coming years are built with the new set of data that Stephen was referring to, that we've been able to put into our thinking, much superior to what we had even just a few years before. So we're a lot more sure about our assumptions now and our forecasts. So I will tell you that as CEO, 7 years in the role, I feel more confident now than I've ever been that we understand the details of our business and therefore the details of our forecast. Unfortunately, that's only of limited comfort to you, I recognize that.
Thanks very much. I'll go on to Elizabeth.
Can you go back to slide 8? The one I'm reading there. I'm not sure this is a question, but I'm struggling to understand this and how it will work. Thinking like if we were talking the municipality, which has different departments that provide services to it. Let's just say parks comes in and said, well, you know, we've pared back everything, but we still need a 19% increase next year. And the city council looks at it and says, well, wait a second, we have, you know, we have roads, we have other things that we have to do. You know, we have many other parts of our business, if you like, that need funding. If parks, in this example, have the right to say, well, we've done our best, but you have to take it because you're a separate board of governance than we are. What that does is it squeezes out things that are really important in our budget that we may not be able to afford because we can't, I mean, we talk about these increases that are coming to us that we can't control, but I can assure you that our municipal funding partners, while they may be sympathetic, they don't really care because in the end, they're going to decide what their citizens will accept as an increase. And so I'm sympathetic to your planning and your needs, but I don't see how our board is able to put any sort of context around the increase we're being asked to fund because it may shove out something that is actually much more important in the scheme of things. So I wonder, you know, if you're getting some pushback from other
boards, and I'm sure you are. Have you got, some other options? Might take longer to get what you have to do. And won't be front-end loaded like this, because I think it's going to be very problematic to be able to, put this into our budget this year without having it damage some other part of the budget.
Again, we do understand the implications of that. At the end of the day, we're all taxpayers, and we all end up with those increases on our bills. As you can see from the slide, we've taken away for 2025 for sure, all the items highlighted in blue or shaded in blue, which are all those front-loaded items. So an important one is our third operating location. We are out of space, both here and in the Lower Mainland, and we have a redundancy, so service continuity assurance problem between those two locations. If the site here has an operating issue and has to shut down, it can handle the volume in the Lower Mainland, but it doesn't work vice versa. And so at some point that investment needs to be made. We had initially hoped we could start that in 2025. We've heard the concern, we understand it, we're pushing it back, but there's also a limit to that. So all that we have in 2025 right now are really operational maintenance and support activities that are keeping us where we are. We can reduce our service levels. It's not unheard of. It's been done by other organizations. We use the analogy of the park board. We could choose to cut the grass every other week. The equivalent of that for us, but that also has implications that we need to talk about. We're very happy to talk about those things. The standards that we've put into the agreements go back to the earliest relationships Ecom had with police departments in the Lower Mainland. We're not married to them. We're not saying those percentages are not up for debate. In fact, we feel they could be, but it needs to be a bilateral dialogue we need to have about what that balance could be.
Yeah, and I think I guess that's what I'm asking. I don't see a dialogue having started here. Maybe there is an opportunity to look at other alternatives to what you presented to us. And if that's the case, great. I think that our board would probably appreciate having that opportunity. But it's 2025 is just around the corner. We're trying to finalize our budget with our municipalities, and I don't know whether we factored this kind of a raise into our, if we have factored that in. Well, yeah, it's still very difficult to see what it's going to shut out the other side.
Thank you for the comment.
Very much going to Paul.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Just slide 5 talks about, why the levy has been high in the past couple of years. The first one is increased staffing. I guess my first question is, are you 100% staffed at the current moment?
Not 100%. We are not 100% staffed. We're closing the gap. Clearly you can't add 125 operational staff without adding additional other layers that are supportive. They're about training, they're about mentoring. We've changed the way in which we bring staff along. We're investing a lot more money in not just the training module, but also mentoring once they hit the floor. That has led to a happier workforce, less attrition, less sick time. Again, it's a judgment call about where you put the dollars, but we have a little on the non-emergency side. We have a little way to go here on the island. We've got some costing with respect to dispatch, another gap that we need to close, and it's very much at the forefront of our minds because it really is felt by the police services, but it's really felt by our staff as well when we're running short. So Jason and I in particular, we're talking about this earlier today. We've got just a couple of final numbers we have to hammer out on what that's going to look like for 2022.
And just tied into staffing, I realize that the majority of your staff are unionized. Do you have no offhand the FTE count for the union as opposed to FTE count for union exempt? What I'm trying to determine is the ratio between union exempt and unionized staff.
I have to get back to you on that, not off the top of my head.
Okay. I certainly would, you could provide that through our board. That would be great. Thank you.
Very much. I'm going to jump into a question. During my time on the board here and also on the BC Association of Police Boards, there's been more than one conversation about adding a cell phone levy that would support the increasing cost of e-com. Can you give me an update on where we are with that from your perspective?
Yeah, so that proposal is with the province and it was reiterated as a resolution that was approved by UBCM again this year at the convention. The province has acknowledged that as a possibility, and it's something that they are looking into. That's really as much as we can tell you. Now, clearly, right this week, we're waiting for new government, so we need to see where that goes. We do know that there is a commitment from the province to look more at e-com, look at how we're funded, look at how we're governed. In fact, the premier said as much in a public speech at the UBCM convention a few weeks ago. So that's very encouraging, but we don't have any details beyond that ourselves.
Any more questions on this? Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Tanya, try to get him. We need to get started for the next presentation. No, Mike wasn't able to. I've been advised that Mike is online and a different sergeant is doing the presentation.
Sure, if I may, I'm just concerned about the time here, if you have time for this next presentation, or if we should defer it.
I know, yes, we do. I discussed with the chief and we're gonna move forward and have the presentation as planned, so thanks very
Okay.
much. Thanks very much and welcome to Sergeant Simon DeWitt, who's gonna give us a presentation on cybercrime and allow for a few questions. And this is part of our opportunity to learn more about what is going on at PD and about the members and operation. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks very much for the opportunity to come and speak with you guys tonight. Do you have a clicker or? W, okay. Perfect. We can go right to the first slide and I can get right into the meat of it. Presentation is only gonna take probably about 10 minutes. I know you guys are running a little behind this evening, so if you have any questions, you can ask me at the end or you can funnel it to the chief and I can get back to you. Cybercrime unit is a brand new unit here in the Victoria Police Department. So a lot of people asking, why do we have a cybercrime unit and why now? We can probably all imagine the world is changing very quickly. Online world, everyone's going through e-commerce. We have, cyber Black Friday now rather than a regular Black Friday. Electronic communication is a huge part of everyday life. And with that comes the criminals have a larger access to you, to your family, and to your money. And the COVID pandemic just accelerated a lot of those things. Some quick stats for you. Canadians, we spend more time online than anyone else in the world. A stat is 6.5 hours per person per day. So with that, 66% of Canadian organizations report experiencing at least one successful cyber attack against them every single year. And VicBD is not immune to that. We've been victim ourselves of that. 43% of Canadians experience at least one cybersecurity incident per year. And that's either a phishing attack, a malware, a fraud attempt, some sort of unauthorized access to your social media or to your bank account. So what is cybercrime? Generally speaking, it's any activity that is done via computer, the internet, or under other electronic means. And for a police agency or a police unit, I've broken that down into two main groups. That is one, technology as a target, and the other is technology as a tool. First one, technology as a target. That's going to be your true cybercrime, which is ransomware, malware, denial of service. That is any hacking for a criminal purpose. Could be corporate espionage, mischief to data, anywhere where a network or your computer is the actual target of your crime. The cybercrime unit assumes the primary investigative role for all of those offenses. The other one is technology as a tool. That is any traditional criminal offense where they're using technology or computer to assist in committing that offense. So we're talking extortion, threats, some cyberbullying, fraud, drug offenses, any of those traditional criminal offenses can be assisted or bettered through technology. And the cybercrime unit will either assist those investigators or assume a primary role on a case-by-case basis. One of the things we focus on in the cybercrime unit is virtual currency or cryptocurrency. To put that into kind of regular people terms, virtual currency, it's a digital asset. So anything that can be used or used to buy or sell goods. So think of petrol points, think of your Starbucks rewards. Those are all your traditional virtual currencies. Cryptocurrency is a form of virtual currency. The only difference is it's decentralized. So that means that there's no one company controlling it, like Petro-Canada controls their petrol points. Cryptocurrency, there's no centralized authority figure over it. That's why it's decentralized and it's a little bit of the Wild West. So cryptocurrency, it's a digital wallet, meaning that it's not a wallet you put in your back pocket. It's a virtual wallet that you store online. It's got a digital location. Any transaction between a wallet, say if I send the chief money digitally through cryptocurrency, that transaction is going to be recorded on a digital blockchain, and that's recorded for everyone in the world to see. Typically, a Bitcoin wallet is going to have 26 or 35 characters, like you see on the screen here, and it means really nothing unless you know what you're looking for. So I can send, cryptocurrency can be sent anonymously from one digital wallet to another digital wallet. Where it becomes important for police is that in order to cash out your digital assets, you're going to have to link your digital wallet to a cryptocurrency exchange. And because the United States has a know your customer legislation, in order to cash out your cryptocurrency, you actually have to present a government ID. And that's where we chime in and write production orders to these exchanges to gather a copy of those legitimate government IDs. And that's how we identify some of these actors online. This is just a quick image of one of a simple cryptocurrency trace. On the left, you see 3 circles. That for this file, this was a senior citizen here in Victoria who was misled to deposit 8 separate times in an ATM downtown, a Bitcoin ATM. You can see as the money moves left to right, all it does is funnel it to another circle, which is another digital wallet in control of a criminal. That criminal then sends it 8 separate times to another digital wallet. And that is the 21st century version of money laundering. All they're doing is sending from one digital wallet to their own digital wallet in a different name of number in order to subvert police detection. And the last transaction in green, that is the person cashing out the $40,000 and withdrawing the money. So any additional responsibilities we've taken on as the cybercrime unit, we attend all search warrants, executions to take over the seizure of electronic devices. We have some computer forensic ability. We've taken over the facial screening analysis, which we're all familiar with. And then we assist investigators with any covert access to websites with covert undercover use with VPNs, and we do some dark web investigations as well. That's what I have for you in a nutshell. Open to questions as well. One last thing is what I've noticed is we're getting dozens and dozens of reports every single day from Victoria and Esquimalt citizens. A lot of it is senior citizens or people that have fallen victim to a telephone scam, an online scam, maybe a grandparent scam, and they're coerced to go downtown, deposit money into a cryptocurrency ATM. We get so many of these, and a lot of them funnel off offshore, overseas, to people that we can't physically touch as police agencies. And once it hits some of these exchanges overseas, we really have limited ability to recover some assets if we don't investigate almost immediately. So one of my initiatives, along with Cheryl's group here, was to do a bit of a public media campaign. And with that, I can hand out some quick pamphlets here. And then it's just try to get to the citizens of Victoria and Esquimalt to just let them know the best way to prevent cybercrime is to just be aware and you have some operational security, I guess you could say. You know, have unique passwords, don't fall victim to these phone scams, and that kind of thing.
Thank you very much. Thanks for taking the time to come. We really appreciate it. Like I can see a question over there in the corner, Sean.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. A question for you. This is the relatively new unit to our police department. How do you compare your size or your capabilities to say Saanich or Winshore? Are you same size, larger, smaller, in terms of provide sort of service level?
Yeah, we're brand new unit starting January of this year. Right now, we are 2 officers, myself and another detective. I believe there's a funding request in the next budget cycle to try bolster that. If I compare it to other CRD units, we are ahead of Saanich. I don't believe they have a cybercrime unit. And I don't believe Westshore has a cybercrime unit as well. Compared to other units in Ontario, we are smaller than most other units.
Are you guys currently doing actual outreach, like putting on seminars for seniors or any of that sort of stuff? Like I know in Esquimalt, I can only imagine if you put something on at the rec center, how many people would show up to learn about this, the seniors in the community. I'm just wondering if that's something that.
The cybercrime unit themselves are not doing any community. We have done a few community presentations upon specific request. Most of the fraud presentations are conducted by the community engagement division.
Okay.
Yeah, we just came up with these pamphlets about a week ago, and that is part of our strategy to now fan it out and see what's the largest amount of groups we can impact with this. So that's probably going to be one of our next steps.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Please.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair. Simon, thanks for the presentation. And just for the board members and members of the public, I just wanted to kind of recognize the work that Simon and Vlad have done to get this unit up and running. There is so much work to be done. We do have a cybercrime strategy at the Victoria Police Department. It's got 5 pillars, but a lot of it is around prevention. And a lot of it is informing the public of how not to become a victim of these kind of phishing scams and making sure that we're doing everything we can. There's a huge learning component, as you can just imagine, where Simon's at and where we want to train our frontline officers at. We know how to respond to a robbery that happens at knife point or at gunpoint. We know that most of the people do live digitally, or we live our lives online and also in person. So how do we deal with the capacity, the expertise that's needed, and develop that so that we can serve the residents of Victoria and Esquimalt when they are the victim of a cyber attack or something that happens with online crime. So this is an area that is of deep interest to us. We do need to continue to build capacity, and we'll continue to do that. But this was just, like, I know, Simon, you took 10 minutes just to give the board a high level snippet. If anyone is interested in learning more, please do myself, the deputy chiefs, we can get you more information.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will move on to item 3C. I'm just gonna look around to see any declarations of conflict of interest. Seeing none. Thank you, and I'm gonna seek a motion to adopt the public minutes of September 17th. Elizabeth, seconded by Paul. Any discussion? No, all those in favor? Motion carries. I'm gonna move on to the board co-chairs update, which should be the board chair update. Thank you very much. A few personalities, but they don't come out of the board meetings. I don't have anything specific to update, but I'll just take a moment and thank everybody for the many people who've given me support and guidance and answered my questions and chatted with me as I've gotten my feet under me in my first few months of as chair. So that is my main update for today, is appreciating everybody. And now we'll move on to committee's update and pass it over to my colleague Paul, who I think has some motions to be brought back.
Perfect. I just noted that, and I'll through the chair to our board EA, I think that there is also one motion missing, which is approving the board manual changes that we did at the very end of the meeting. If I just want to, if you can just clarify that. We went at the last governance committee meeting, I called my colleagues, we went through the changes and there was a motion to recommend to the board. I'm fairly certain of that. I see my colleague Sean concurring with me. So I,
That the board approved the.
well, so what I'll do is I'll just move a C when we get there, because it will probably make sense to deal with A and B before we do the one that I just raised. So thank you, Chairperson. Remuneration policy, this is, I need to qualify that the two A and B are simply flowing out of recent changes from the government in regards to how boards are comprised, and that's changing of the council representatives. And so we, the governance committee, had to basically change our board manual to reflect that we no longer have co-chairs and so on. And a couple of these side motions just came up, but the first one is I'll just move it, and then we can get into a discussion on it. That the board update the manual to reflect that any elected official to the board does not receive remuneration.
Seconder to the motion, seconded by Elizabeth. Discussion? Start with you.
Thank you, and I really appreciate the board tabling this to bring it back today. The challenge of the changes that we are going through are reflected in all the great work that you've been doing. But I wanted to provide a perspective. First, let me say, I have, because I was a co-chair, never received remuneration because it was within the Police Act that I was on the board. So I am not seeking remuneration at all. But what I want you to consider is the change in the act no longer mandates the mayor for the police board. It says the council needs to elect someone to the board, but it really doesn't fall under the fact that it is a mandated position for any one person. And because of that, I'm concerned that not considering remuneration for elected officials to have the opportunity to accept or not to accept really challenges I can see Esquimalt to get a volunteer to come on the board. We are a council that does not have significant remuneration for the councillors. We all know what the board hours are that get put in here. I would suggest that although it's only 6 hours of meeting, there's I would say substantially more hours that get put into the board. And you want somebody that is going to participate fully and be able to. Most of my counselors work full-time. So they would have to come away from their work. And sometimes that is also challenging. I certainly I think that the board should consider that all members coming to this board should be treated equally, and that there should be compensation offered across the board. It's the right of the elected official to refuse, as it is any of you. But I know I've heard from many of you that it's difficult if you don't get some compensation to put the hours in here. And that's no different. So as I say, I don't want, I want to be on record. I would not take compensation. I haven't for 15 years. So this would be up to the next term around. But I think that you're looking for people with good experience and the opportunity to participate fully. And without considering how you are separating those appointees who, as I said again, I want to stress, will volunteer for this within council. So I wanted to be able to put forward a different perspective. Yeah, I will accept your vote in however you deem it. But I worry that going forward, again, the uniqueness of our board and our makeup of two councils, two very different remunerations, et cetera. I will not support the motion, given my feelings on this. But I thank you for delaying so that I could be here in attendance to state my reasoning. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Barbara. Sean next. Sean, did you have your hand up or you just?
Yeah, I did, sorry, thank you. Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure. I'll be very quick. Thank you, Mayor, for your perspective. I really appreciate that. I understand where you're coming from. Just want to add that I think the governance committee was looking, and I won't speak for the chair, but speak to it very quickly, but the governance committee is coming to the perspective of that no other elected official we know of in BC has a policy where an elected official is remunerated. So we're sort of following that information we've received. However, from your perspective, I understand what you're saying, that it can be difficult to ask people to serve at a level on the board when there's no remuneration. I also understand that Esquimalt is looking at a alternative policing model. I don't know where the process is, but the community is looking into it. Should Esquimalt get their own department or what have you, but what it may be or whatever it looks like, likely they'll have their own board, in which case their board can then decide if you wish to have an elected person remunerated. Same thing with Victoria, because of course this is ordering council to curb the amalgamation. And if it's just if this should not be a big if, I'm not saying anybody, but this is it balls in the air as we say it as expression. If that happens, then dissolution outcome by OSC, I imagine. Boards would be separated, boards dissolved, and then everything has to be sort of redrawn again. So there will be an opportunity for each individual community perhaps to look at this particular policy again, and specific to that thing. So that's where I'm coming from. I guess I think I can add just very quickly is to perhaps maybe a suggestion to the mayor, and I understand where you're coming from, is we could, or the company could look at this policy again in the future, say after a certain time period. So maybe before next election or something, what have you, this policy can be revisited. And maybe that time that board can then feel that they're in a comfortable position to make that recommendation. So there's any mean that's set in stone, but it could be revisited. So that might be but I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Sean. I've got Paul, Elizabeth, and then Dale.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. Just, I want to just clarify, the subject is called remuneration. This is not remuneration. This policy came in about because the old policy of submitting invoices for your out-of-pocket expenses became a huge burden administratively within, and we decided to go to an annual stipend. At the time when we did this stipend, there was no significant change in the actual annual compensation. So I want to clarify just for everybody here today and who are maybe listening that this in fact isn't a way of changing the board's a stipend or honorarium for doing the work. The policy that's before us was reviewed by the governance committee. The governance committee is unanimously recommending the words here for several reasons that Sean mentioned. The first one was that we were not aware of any of our colleagues in other boards remunerating or offering a stipend or an honorarium at that time. We have subsequently found one board out of all the boards of British Columbia that they have. So we don't see that as the norm or the practice that we should follow. I think the other points that I want to make is is the council representatives are not appointed by an order in council. And I think so there is a difference between us here as board members than the council representatives. I think there is a difference. The other thing that I should make is the policy, it has a built-in review process into it, as well as a process to temporarily increase indemnity amounts for any board members. So if in fact the scenario that my colleague Mayor Desjardins put forward, we could built into the policy make adjustments and adjust to those circumstances, if in fact the board so choose. But for the reasons of being watching our finances, for the reasons of the distinguished point between the not being different than an OIC appointed by through government, and given that we feel that if council wants to remunerate its representative, it has a sole choice to do that internally. And so again, on behalf of the governance committee, we're recommending this unanimously, and I'll leave it at that for the moment. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Paul. I've got Elizabeth and then Dan. You're good. Okay, Dale?
I'm not able to support the motion either. I feel strongly that setting up a system where some members of council are not paid a stipend sets up a class system within girls. And so what's the next step? Is there somebody who's making a certain amount of money per year is not eligible for it? If you have a certain position or you have a part-time job or you're retired, you get more. So I think it just complicates it. I think it's certainly any one of us can turn down the stipend. And I understand that has been done. But I really do feel that it's almost like systemic discrimination in terms of, you know, based on someone's position on the.
Thank you very much, Dale. I've got Mary Ann and then Molly.
So I have a really arcane question. In the document here, it refers to a section called remuneration. But a number of people keep saying remuneration. They're two different things. So which one is it? Remuneration is about accounting, and remuneration is about compensation after an act.
Correct.
So which is
It's the latter.
It's the latter.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we could have some consistency in that.
Yeah,
that would
you're
be
correct.
awesome.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that my late mother would have broken for her grave.
Well
So
spotted.
let me say something. I don't have a strong opinion on this because certainly it's been my policy for years never to accept anything that's a function of the fact that I've been elected to something. Having said that, there's just one thing I wanted to report on, and that is currently the city of Victoria has been engaging with the province around potential appointments and reappointments. And wanting to clarify that process, we asked for clarification on why we were advised that this no longer involved the province whatsoever. And one of the many answers that we had noted that with the amendments to the Police Act that came into effect this year, all council appointments to the police board are no longer OIC appointments set by the Lieutenant Governor and Council at any stage. And with this, the province will no longer have any part in the appointment process. So just on your earlier point about this being an OIC, that's no longer the case. With that, it means that for the two municipalities involved here, future appointments will become aspects of the work of the councils only. And so what they do with that then is up to the councils. With regard to what happens at the board, it seems to me that with all of these wonderful changes that Mayor Desjardins and I tried desperately not to be overly gleeful about no longer being chairs, I'm sorry. It does mean though, I think, that every member of the board is a member of the board, with the exception of the chair, who has special responsibilities. And so I see no reason to differentiate among any member of the board or any type of remuneration. So I'm afraid I can't accept this either because I do, though it has no personal impact on me. I don't think it's fair. I don't see a problem from the city of Victoria's perspective of recruiting, because there's a high expectation of participation on council members for a variety of external requirements. At the same time, I acknowledge that our situation is different than the townships. And so while I can't comment on those reasons, there are other reasons for me that I think that if you're going to pay anyone, you pay everyone.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna go to Holly.
So I have one question. Who is the other board that's paying them?
In my notes here, it indicates that New Westminster is paying its chair, who is a council member. So it is the person acting as chair.
Okay, New Westminster. So there's a couple of things. Number one, I will never be on board with doing something just because everyone else is doing it that way. So that is never going to be an argument to sway me one way or another. Everything should be taken at face value for what we're looking at right now in front of us. So that to me that's not an argument. The other thing, I'm struggling a lot with this because I would vote in favor of remuneration if both mayors were willing to take it. And this is the hardest part for me, in that not being willing to take it, me voting in favor of doing it, both of you turning it down, what that does in the future, should it be a counselor, is it puts pressure on that person to also turn it down, in my opinion. And that's not a fair position to put that person in. What I would prefer to do, knowing that you've both stated that you will not take the funds, is put a very specific date on revisiting this, or every single time there is a mayor or council coming into the role, that we vote on remuneration at that point in time. Because I think by putting it on the books that we've offered remuneration to the municipal whoever, and they've turned it down, I really struggle to see how anyone, without getting blasted by the media or whoever, when they do decide that they want to claim it, how we're not setting them up for success. That sets that person up for a really, really tough haul if they do want to be remunerated. And we can manage that at the time that it comes about.
Thank you very much, Holly. I know you had a second.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the discussion. And I did understand that you did go to other boards to understand what they are doing, and that's very interesting for New Westminster. And Holly, with all due respect to your comment about us not taking it, setting somebody else up, there is a difference. Mayors get compensated a significant amount more. As well, we're into a term right now already. And so all we're doing is continuing as it was. So I don't see it as setting somebody up for future problems. What I'm hoping to do is to show you that we're not like every other board. We're unique. We're different. We know that. We say that every week. And we want to get the very best people. And we want to get people who can take the time and spend the time. And in order to do that, then they will require, sometimes they will require a stipend. I can absorb this within what salary I get as mayor. I don't believe councilors can. And so I'm trying to protect it for the very best candidate to come forward from council. And clearly New Westminster saw that somebody who is, although they're an elected official, and they wanted to take on that responsibility, which may happen here as well. You may have somebody who is a municipal councillor who wants to take on the role of chair. They have to be treated equally right from the beginning. And this is why I've argued this. but I really appreciate your comments. The order in council, thank you, Mary Ann. I didn't see that as any reasonable argument for the lack of remuneration or stipend, or however you want to call it.
Thank you. I've got Elizabeth for a second, but I'm just gonna jump in and ask a quick question. This might be directed to you, Barb. If nobody were to come forward from Esquimalt wanting to participate, what would happen?
That's a good question. You won't have representation. I don't see anything in the act that says you're compelled to.
But also you won't have representation. Like, how would you?
Well, and that's a bilateral problem for the community as well as the board. But I see it as something that could be a strong reality. And I have canvassed my council with regard to their ability to come here. So I have an understanding of where this could go.
Thank you. Back to you, Elizabeth, and then we should call.
I have a question for the chair of governance. What does our manual say right now about this? Silent, or is there something specific about the remuneration?
I don't have the old policy would have had the co-chairs not I can't, I'd have to check. I'd have to check.
All right, so the reason I'm
Sorry,
asking.
I have the current one before me, Elizabeth, sorry, I don't have the old one before me.
The reason I'm asking is because if it is silent on it, or I guess I'm persuaded by Holly's argument. There's no reason why we can't revisit this at another time if we get to the stage where there might be a non-mayor municipal appointee to our board. At which point we could decide, persuaded by Barb's argument, the amount of work that we do that. In many cases, for remuneration, and councilors get. So I'm inclined, if the manual doesn't require to be changed, doesn't require us to do something specifically to speak to it. And right now, the mayors are not being paid, then I'd leave it as it is. We can revisit this at another time. If it does, then
Paul's got the answer for it.
Yeah.
Talking long enough to give them the answer.
Yeah, and I don't really want to get bogged down in this, but the old policy says, although this is a volunteer position, all board members except the co-chairs are eligible to receive remuneration. Right, so.
But it would change.
So.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I've got Tim as a first-time speaker, Holly, and then I'd like to call them motion and move.
Thank you, and I think this is a interesting place. I think the conversation that Sean began on revisiting makes a little bit more sense now. This is new territory. We are revising and figuring things out. I think very, very highly, and that it is important to make this position as exciting and affordable and appealing as possible, because it is an incredible privilege, but also the diversity of voices around this table is even more important. So if at any point this discussion is going to lean towards not affording diversity, then that's another question. But for now, since this is quite new for us, since we have two members that will not accept, I think it makes sense just to have, and I think our manual says that it is in our mandate to come back to this at a future date.
I have a question about the motion itself, Chair. If this motion is defeated, then nothing changes.
It is an interesting motion in that way. It's a.
New motion should come forward.
That a new motion is come forward.
It's a
An
negative,
affirmative.
negative motion saying that that they don't get remuneration. If we don't pass it, they still don't get remuneration because the manual says they don't. So I think the motion's a bit weird, but it's like a double negative. I just want to know what the consequence is of voting yay or nay to this, so that I don't make the wrong decision.
Paul, you want to answer that? This motion stemmed from a governance committee meeting?
Look, I think we're overthinking this, tenfold. The reason why this is coming forward is the old manual is out of date because it still uses the word co-chairs. So what we're trying to do is just put in the word chair in there, so we needed to deal with the two council representatives. So we needed to put them in there. So it was a question of, in the old manual, they were not compensated because they were the mayors. So what we're effectively doing is saying the same thing here in the same language. And again, if this passes, again, this is being recommended by the governance committee. We've heard both mayors saying that even if it failed and we compensated, they wouldn't take it. So there's going to be no net change in this. The policy allows it to be updated if in fact after the next election there's a new rep, the policy can be changed. And if something changes in the interim, the chair has the authority to actually do a temporary change right in the policy. And I will also say, the next community election is 2026. Esquimalt has already served notice that they want to leave the Victoria Police Board, and that actually expires at the end of 2026. And so in some sense, this is all kind of coming to light here in the sense that there really isn't much, we're arguing over really no real net change either way. Well, what I'm trying to do on behalf of the governance committee is just clean up the policy manual and move forward. Thank you.
I've got a couple more, but I think we should call the motion if you guys. Okay, Holly, Barb, and Marianne, and then I'm stopping it.
I don't think this is just a cleaning up of the manual. However, that being said, I would vote 100% in favor of remunerating counselors. If that was the motion that was on the floor right now, and if we weren't discussing mayoral remuneration, I would vote in favor of it 100%. I think the motion is wrong. I think the motion is addressing the wrong issue.
I agree with Holly, but I want to remind the board that my appointment is only until the end of next year. And how do you recruit somebody from council who is likely to be a counselor when you are going to consider the policy again at a later date? So if this motion gets defeated, I would suggest we either go with the new standing, which is everyone gets remunerated, and we can be clear with that, and or Holly can put forward a motion saying support any remuneration for counselors, something like that. But it does not make sense to review the policy and try and recruit someone before you've reviewed it.
Marianne quickly, and then I'm going to.
I think that the issue here is focusing on the fact that there are mayors and not co-chairs. And if this said something like, should the elected officials be mayors, they don't get any money. But the fact that it excludes every elected official means that the councillors also can get it. I'd like to move a motion to refer. And so I'd like to refer this back, this one line, not compromising the rest of the, this one line back to the governance committee for further consideration.
Seconded by Elizabeth. Yeah. Would you like to speak to Elizabeth?
No, I think that we have a motion that's not worded correctly, as I said a few minutes ago, because the consequence of actually adopting it is unclear as to whether remuneration will or won't be paid, depending on what we do in the manual. I think it should go back to governance. We should rewrite it and bring it back. This is not urgent to deal with this now.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Got another couple of motions.
Yeah, so the second one, I think we're probably gonna have a similar debate here, or not, I'm not sure. So again, trying to clean up our board manual from the words of co-chairs. We, in the past, co-chairs were not on committees. And we had to deal with, should they be on committees, yes or no? So the governance committee is recommending that it shouldn't be mayors, that should actually say that the board approved the council representative be allowed to participate on committees. I'll move that.
Second, Elizabeth. Paul, or Elizabeth, would you like to speak to this?
It makes complete sense to me. We don't have enough board members to take 2 members out of the mix. And I know, speaking for myself, the chair of one of the committees, I'm always interested in knowing what our municipal representatives have to say about the issues that are in front of us.
Okay, about Barb and then Paul.
Thank you, and again, thank you for hearing me out on this. Within the board manual, I have noticed that there's some statements missing, and really all it speaks to is the minimum of 4 board members per committee, but it doesn't speak to the responsibility of all the members of the board. And I believe it speaks to that the chair is ex officio, but if we had a clear motion that said that all members of the board participate on committees, and the chair may appoint members as they see fit. I understand you had challenges around the idea of conflict of interest for municipal representatives, et cetera, but really, we all have the same responsibility on the board, and that is that we participate, and we participate through committee work. And so if we change the wording just to speak to all members, it takes away that municipal or mayors can now be on things, which is really not embracing the changes that we have made. And so I have a challenge with the wording. And I don't know whether if I make this an amendment, whether you see it as a friendly amendment or an amendment that doesn't change the intent of the motion. I don't think it really does. I think it clarifies our manual better. But I would look to the governance people as to whether they would accept a change in the wording of the motion to be just inclusive and to be clearer on everybody participates and the board chair has the responsibility to appoint.
Paul, you want to respond to that?
Again, all this motion is doing is trying to say we want the council representative on the committee. It's a one-time enabling motion. Once we do that, the chair can appoint them on committees. It's simply that. It's not trying to change that there's different status, because right now, the old language in the board manual says that you're not part of those committees. So what the governance committee is trying to say, in the words of allowing, we could change the word allow to we want, we welcome, but at the end of the day, the net effect is that the council of representatives should be on committees. I don't think we need to rechange the policy, because we have policy on all the committees and the composition. So I'm not gonna die on the hill on this one. I think we've spent too much time talking about these last 2 items. But I think the intent of what we're trying to do here is to get more participation on our important committees. I think is clear and effective in it, and that's simply, there's no trick motion here. Thanks.
Thank you, and I will just speak to one thing that I don't believe, and I don't want to speak on behalf of everybody, but from my perspective, it wasn't that board members were considering that there was a challenge and a conflict of interest challenge. We were going through a due process of being in a transition period and having a conversation, because it was new, the idea to have an elected official on committee. It's never specifically been challenge, so just to remove that word from the conversation. So, I mean, you guys do not make this easy for me. What are we doing here? We recall.
I call the question on the vote.
Okay, second,
Yes.
Elizabeth? All those in favor?
Hang on,
Oh.
first you need to ask whether or not there's a
Seek the
vote. We need to seek permission to call the vote. So first you're voting on, are you prepared to call?
Am I prepared to call the vote?
Is the group?
Is the group now prepared to call the vote?
in favor?
All those in favor? Motion carries. All right, so now I move forward and call the vote on the motion as it's presented. All those in favor? Aye, motion carries. Okay. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, and I will move,
Can I make a subsequent motion? And that is that we amend the manual to read that all members of the board will participate on committees as appointed by the chair.
There a seconder? Elizabeth? Any discussion? All those in favor? 3, 4, 5, 6. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Can I get that motion again, please?
Yep. Sorry.
Chairperson, I want to just ask how you want to deal with the motion regarding the rest of the changes, the housekeeping changes that were made by the, I certainly could move a motion, but the remuneration part is part of the board manual. So I could either defer the whole package or move them all the others except for that one section. I would prefer probably that, you know, but I need direction from you.
I'm comfortable to move forward doing that, but I'm not sure if people feel okay with that. It's not in with the motion not listed in the agenda. Elizabeth?
I noticed that there's still some typos and errors in the manual, so maybe we need one more cleanup.
I move that the board manual be referred back to the governance committee.
Seconder? Holly, any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
That's it for governance. Thank you.
I've got just to Donna for the monthly financial report. And I hate to do it, but I need to step up for a moment. Elizabeth, can you chair?
Donna, you got the report?
Yeah, so the main message here is that we're targeting, the report is as at September 23rd, 2024. We're targeting 74.4% based on payroll. Our actual results are coming in slightly higher at 75.9%. In terms of dollar value, that's approximately $1 million. But it's reasonable given the fact that we have 792,000 spent in retirement costs year to date, which are unbudgeted. And if we do not have a surplus in the year, those funds will be, or that cost will be funded from the employee retirement obligation fund. And it's also reasonable given that the integrated units, which are about 794,000 overspent, have a lot of year-end adjustments pending for the cost sharing from other police agencies. And everything else in the report, open to questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Donna. On the first page of your report under budget adjustment, you talk about a $290,000 budget for bylaw support. And I was wondering what that is.
That is specific to the city of Victoria, so we have the costs for that support on the wage side, and then an offsetting recovery from the city of Victoria, so it's a nil.
Okay, and so that's why it's moved to special events to do
Yes.
that. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so seeing none, somebody move that we do with this, we don't adopt it, we receive it. Is there anything to do? This is the
Nope.
committee's report. So
We just get an update on it.
Nothing?
Thanks very much. Moving on to board member engagement update. Anybody have anything pressing to share? No, great, thank you. Item H, Chief Constable update.
Perfect, thank you, Chair. The report's in your package on page 51, pretty self-explanatory. You'll note that since the last board meeting, I've had a lot of internal engagement, meeting with all newly promoted sergeants and staff sergeants. Also met with all our civilian staff in a chief's update that I provided. And also the deputies and I met with all the staff sergeant rank as well. The BC Law Enforcement Memorial Ceremony was on the last Sunday of September on the 29th. So I just wanted to acknowledge Mayor Alto for being there. Board Chair Michaela Hayes was there. Tim Katuri was there, and Sean Dillon was there from our board. I hope I'm not missing anyone from our board that was there. It was nice to see your presence there, and thank you for honoring the families of the fallen and those that have paid the ultimate price. And the rest of my report talks about some external engagement that I did, but I'm happy to take any questions if you have. Thank you.
No questions, we'll move to item I, equity, diversity, inclusion, and engagement update.
Sure, and the updates, there's two things listed on page 52 of 52. Two events attended on the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, attended the South Island Powwow. And also attended the, I'm on the Executive Council for Special Olympics BC, and we had an Executive Council meeting talking about some of the fundraising efforts that we're gonna have into 2025. That's my update.
Thank you very much. And quickly just going on to item 4, which is new business. This is something that I flagged last year after I attended the reserve dinner. And I noticed all the wonderful door prizes that are donated to the reserves and volunteers. And I felt remiss that the board didn't sponsor any of the door prizes for that event. So I brought it up at the time. Tim was there with me and we spoke about it, and I kept in touch with Tara Gilroy Scott. I have an excellent fact that was sent to me that I just want to share. In 2023, Vic PD reserves and volunteers contributed 14,455 volunteer hours, or the equivalent of 6.9 full-time staff. And that would cost approximately $700,000 in value if we were doing this work with paid staff. So I do want to look to seek a motion for the board to put forward some funds to sponsor a door prize for this event. And in speaking with Tara, the best way to do that is for us to choose a dollar amount, give that money to her, and then she selects something and it's attributed to us at the dinner. Looking for a motion on that, Tim?
Yes.
Well, I think you have to choose an amount.
700 and
$700,000.
Yeah, run them out. Well,
I was gonna say two,
something like that.
but that motion.
Okay, I'll propose the motion that the Victoria Esquimalt Police Board sponsor a door prize at the reserve dinner at the amount of $250.
Would have a second for that motion? Dale, any discussion?
Yeah. Is it possible with the way you worded the motion that the door prize could be, they usually are about $100, so could you split that into two?
I think that's fine. The intent is to give the money to Tara to select something on behalf.
I'm gonna make sure.
Sean, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'll be making a decision to make it 500. Is there any amendment for that, or? Because a number of reserves and number of people there, 250 seems, I leave reassured, I think 2 is enough.
We have 83 civilian volunteers and about 63 reserve volunteers.
And how many prizes do we usually have already in place? Is there any?
I think there's about 6 to 8. So this motion also goes forward to the leadership team for so yeah, about 68 prizes, so less than 10%. I'm sure any amount would be welcome.
I'll second the amendment to raise it up to $500.
Right, any further discussion?
I just think that, you know, these folks do, just fantastic work on behalf of the citizens of Esquimalt and Victoria and this board. I think $500 is, on an annual basis, is very reasonable, to say thank you to all of those volunteers.
Very much. Any more discussion on this, Holly?
I'd just like to amend it to say 500. Not up to 500. That is not a solid motion. $500.
Right, any further discussion on this? Mark?
Do we have these funds in our budget?
Yes.
Thank you. So I'd like to call the motion as amended by Holly. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. I'm just gonna go back to the chief who has something else to add to his report.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair. I know we're short on time, but I just wanted to go to Deputy McCray and Laidman if there's any ops or admin update for the public.
I will just share one ops update. I think most of you have probably seen this reported publicly now. Our missed officers, missed officer and missed counselor who works with the missed officer, their work in our community has been reduced to 2 days per week. The police officer work remains at full capacity. The counselor work has run out of funding or is in process of running out of funding. So the funders have had to reduce the amount that they're available to us. This is Mia Golden, of course, for those who remember, she's spoken here many times. Unfortunately, down to 2 days a week. Several letters have been written to government by various organizations requesting that the funding be, stable, ongoing, and consistent. This has been a problem on and off for actually quite a few years with this funding for this particular role. Unfortunately, the response from government thus far has been that they do not wish to provide or add any additional funding for this role. I raise this because I want to express how disappointed I am in this decision. For an agency such as ours, where we value our relationship with students, young people, schools, and this right now is our only true connection, at least in the school system. Losing that ability is very concerning, and there's not just our agency, it's other agencies that we partner with. Instead of reducing to 2 days a week, my personal belief is we should be expanding programs like this. We have proven time and time again, and Victoria Police Department has been a leader in partnering with other subject matter experts in various partnerships that we are in, and shown how these can work so well with an expert. And instead, we are now going to go backwards. It's very disappointing. It is something that, as I said, I suspect you've seen some media on, but continues to be a challenge, and we will continue to work towards trying to restore that funding to full time, but at this point, we're down to 2 days a week for our missed. Thank you.
Just one thing for the sake of time, and it's a bit of a shout out to the City of Victoria staff in the EDIA office. We've started engaging a dialogue with them to hopefully elicit some of their expertise and starting a partnership here in the community with folks down at the EDIA office in the City of Victoria. So our first meeting is very productive.
Anything else to add? I will seek a motion to adjourn the public meeting. Elizabeth, second Mary Ann, all those in favor? Motion carries. Yes.